Of course, just like your mom. Well, yeah, who raised you? Do you want a child or do you want to be a mom?
And why? If we know that what we repeat hurts us, even if it's familiar, why do we repeat it?
The big challenge we have as parents in raising children is knowing where I end and where my child begins.
I have to make up for dad because he's more childish than me.
I feel happy, but the issue is the father of my child is married.
Comunidad Conquistadora, welcome to another episode of Conquista tu Mundo, the podcast. I'm happy because today, here at Carajillo Nazaric, I'm having a Carajillo with Natalia Ruiz. As a friend and returning podcast guest, you're already family.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
It's so nice to be back.
I'm glad you're here.
Yes, me too.
We already did one, what was it, 2 years ago?
I think it was longer, maybe 3 years.
It's been a long time, huh?
Yeah,
We have to do this more often.
I know.
Well, but today I'm very happy to invite you to chat, and also so everyone knows that I wrote a beautiful book mainly focused on teenagers, right? It's called Repetir or Reparar. More or less, what's the essence?
Well, Repetir or Reparar is a book that comes from the idea that adolescence always has a bad reputation, right? Like they say she probably wrote it because this thing with teenagers is terrible, right? And it's actually the opposite. The truth is that I'm a big fan of adolescence, and I've also realized that during adolescence, parents are needed.
Uh-huh.
Learn to see it as a great second chance to learn how to repair the relationship with our children. So, it's a book that's basically focused on parents of teenagers.
Okay.
To try to understand all these repetitive patterns that we're not even aware of, that we've been carrying from other times, even from other generations. We've kept repeating so many things that have surely driven us apart and kept us from being able to have deep relationships or to have them the way we want to. Understanding these patterns is crucial as it will help reopen our relationship with our children.
Definitely, since we often normalize behavior, saying things like, oh, they're a teenager, it's normal for them to act that way. And then, over time, that teenager grows up and it's happened to all of us. And then they start paying a high price for it in their adult life. For everything they didn't heal from in childhood or adolescence, right?
Yes, and actually what this book does, Johnny, is guide parents chapter by chapter, so they can heal from their own adolescence. What you just said is fundamental. Many wounds from our adolescence go unnoticed, and we end up making our children pay for our childhood or our own adolescence. And of course, what adolescence does is bring to the surface many unresolved situations and wounds.
Okay.
Many unresolved issues that we parents carry, and suddenly teenagers bring them to the surface in a big way. Because we start to see exactly what you're talking about, right? Look, when children are little, they look up to us. And then it's like, you're my everything and I want to be like you when I grow up. And mom, you're the prettiest. But part of the process of adolescence is individuation and also separation, right? And that means we'll have to go through a process of de-idealization. Our children stop idealizing us and stop seeing us as perfect, and they start seeing us as ordinary human beings who make mistakes. We start getting criticized and hear things like, you don't do it well, what you do is boring, and I'm not sure I want to be like you when I grow up. And things that, of course, this criticism is nothing more than their need to differentiate themselves from us, to start building their own identity. I mean,
that classic rebellious streak.
of course, part of this is also that rebellious streak. I mean, it's like they know that if they grow up in our shadow, it's a big risk. In the end, they just end up becoming like my mom or my dad. They need to find their own judgment, their own identity, but in that process, it's really hard for the parents. Suddenly, a lot of things come to light because, how? And now the criticism and having to put up with someone telling me, well, I don't agree and you're wrong and I don't like the way you think. And so that part for parents can sometimes be very confronting, very revealing, because then we start to get responses rooted in our own history, not hysterical responses. It's more like when they push one of our buttons.
Okay.
And instead of responding from the present, maybe we start responding from the past, from everything that was left unresolved. Because let's see, what's going on?
With them.
With them.
Ugh.
No, because in the past, what happened was that we had no choice but to stay quiet and obey.
Yes.
When we become parents, the hierarchy reverses. And we feel like we have the power to say, no, now I'm the one in charge. Now I'm the one who decides, the one who says what's going to be done. And in that change of hierarchy, or when that part of the pyramid is reversed, suddenly well, we run the risk that if we haven't resolved our own issues, we might start wanting to assert ourselves with our children and say, no, now I'm in charge.
Like wanting to take out on the child what we couldn't do with mom or dad, something like that.
Totally, right? Like maybe I couldn't tell my mom or my dad, I don't agree, I don't like it, I'm going to do it differently. Don't talk to me like that, don't criticize me or say those things. And now with the kids, we're in a different kind of power dynamic now, let's say, which makes it possible for a lot of past wounds to come up. And the problem is that we parents start taking it very personally. We start experiencing all of this as if it's against us. When they're in a process of finding their identity and searching, trying to understand who they are and what they want at this moment in their lives, right?
So, as I understand it then, it's a joint effort. It's not just about the teenager, sometimes it's also working with your partner too, right? Or how does that natural order work if there is one?
Because this order that suddenly unfolds in all your relationships, when you work through your own adolescence, at the same time, you can understand many things about your teenager. But at the same time, you can also understand many things about your partner. Of course, it's a job that has to be done within the family, but we must not lose sight of the fact that we are the adults.
Of course.
Because how many times do we put ourselves at?
Questionable.
Yes.
Yes, we are the adults.
Questionable, because sometimes we seem like another teenager arguing with a teenager and we lose all perspective and they catch on right away. The moment we lose our center, the message we're sending them is, I can't handle you. You get into my head, into my body and make me lose my peace and my center, and we lose our moral authority. And at that moment, they say, this is just another teenager. There's no real authority here. There's not really a person who can preserve their center in the middle of my own personal crisis, which is normal for my age, right? So yes.
And that in a way hurts them more because they don't have this sense of trust that I have a system that protects me, takes care of me, guides me, helps me, but instead everything is chaos. And so that's where a lot of people say, I hate my parents because it's all confrontation and power struggles, just like it often happens in couples. Or I have to compensate for my dad because my dad is more of a child than I am. Or I have to do what my mom can't do because she's already carrying too much, right? So, without a doubt, the system starts to collapse.
Yes.
How? How do you do it? Because look, you already have the teenager in front of you. How do you do that job at the same time? Because you're talking about him being my mirror, he's going to reflect everything I haven't healed, but at the same time, I have to support him. It becomes a really big task.
Really big, but it's like understanding that, yes, he's my mirror, but at the same time, he's not. The big challenge we have as parents in raising our children is knowing where I end and where my child begins.
Okay.
We often see them as our business cards, even if that's not always clear to us. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves, wait, this is my child's life. Sometimes they feel like a part of us, my hand, my leg. And that's when we get really confused. Because then we start putting expectations on our children that have to do with everything that maybe was left unfinished in the past. Hey, I wasn't the popular kid, you'd better be, right? Solve the issue and be the popular kid. Hey, I wasn't the smartest one in school or the one with the best grades. And we start building a lot of expectations. Like, since I didn't have it, you're going to have it.
Okay.
But that's where we lose that boundary between this is me. And this is you existing with your decisions, with your life, with your desires, with your concerns, right? And then suddenly these kids end up growing up and come to the counselor's office with the feeling that they're not enough. This feeling of not being enough has to do with parents placing expectations on their children and making them feel like they never lived up to them. They didn't meet all expectations and fell short. And when you can do that work of saying, well, that's my mom's issue. If I didn't meet her expectations or she had her own issues.
Of course.
Well, being able to achieve that differentiation, because that little inner voice that's always giving us a hard time is really the voice of our parents.
So then it's a tell me if I'm wrong or confirm it for me. It's a kind of relationship similar to a romantic partnership in that we project our own shortcomings onto them. We try to fill those gaps through our children, like we often do with a partner, but from a superior position. And that hurts them a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, because as you said, we don't choose a partner, we choose emotional patterns in which we somehow feel, well, kind of at home, right? I mean, a familiar scenario for me, right? It's not so much about the partner, but about how you make me feel. And I say, even if it makes me suffer, it's something I know. And that's when these repeating patterns begin to emerge.
And if we know that what we repeat hurts us, even if it's familiar, why do we repeat it?
For many reasons. But one of them is because we always have the hope that this time things will be different, right? And so there's this scenario: you make me suffer, but this time you will love me, this time you will choose me, this time you won't abandon me, this time you will listen to me. This time I'm going to do something to make the story different, and so we insist, and we don't realize that we're falling into a repetitive pattern.
We're repeating the same actions, expecting different results, just like Albert Einstein said only a crazy person would.
Of course, because this is also very important, the repetition of patterns is about substance, not just form. It's not about form. I mean, sometimes it seems like we're changing the way we do things, but in reality, what keeps repeating is the underlying issue in the relationship.
That's powerful. What does that look like? Can you give an example?
Let's say Maria comes to my office so that we can start to understand this situation a little better. Maria tells me, Natalia, I'm here to see you because I'm pregnant and I'm happy. Up to that point, everything was fine, right? But something happens with patients when they come in for a session. It's like when you go to the dentist. Usually we go to the dentist to show them our cavities. It's rare for someone to come in saying, I'm here to show you my white teeth. So you know that behind that story where apparently everything is fine, there's something else. And sure enough, Maria tells me, I'm pregnant, I feel happy, but the problem is that the father of my child is a married man. So let's try to understand here, right? And she says, I'm very confused. I'm happy, I want to have my baby, but I don't know what to expect from him. I don't know how I'm going to resolve this inner conflict, and so on. And so we start to have this conversation to understand her story a little, and it turns out that Maria tells me this isn't the first time she's been involved with married men. In other words, it's like a pattern she keeps repeating in her life. And when these patterns start to repeat or start to appear during the session, the question isn't why did it happen to her again? Why did she fall in love with a married man again? Why does she like married men? The right question is, what is Maria repeating? And that's when we start to try to understand her history a little bit. As we go into her history, she tells me her father is an alcoholic, a father who struggled with significant alcoholism, and because of that, he wasn't emotionally available for her since he was dealing with his illness in his own way. So that's where part of the repetition pattern appears. That is, Maria was used to connecting with men who were not emotionally available for her. When I asked her how her relationship with her dad made her feel, she'd say something like this. Suddenly, I felt like my emotions didn't matter that much, or that there were things more important to him than me. And how does it make you feel when you're with a man who you suddenly find out also has another relationship or even a family? And it's kind of the same feeling. I feel like they're not really there for me. That suddenly what I feel or who I am isn't really the priority. It's not what's important because they have other things that sometimes seem more important. So this is important because we see how the repetition isn't about the form. The form is very different. It's not that she was getting involved with alcoholic men, like you might think. She will probably end up choosing that too, which can also happen, of course, in the repetition pattern. But the repetition is at a deeper level. That is, what she felt in this relationship with her dad is the same thing she tends to look for in other relationships.
That's really tough. But she doesn't see it that way. However, how does she start wanting to come to you?
This is extremely important because the reason why we look for this space is perhaps when our symptoms, we start to manifest certain things that start to make us suffer. Suffering is the big sign. Emotional pain is the great gift that we humans have. Pain is a gift because it is the way that teaches us that something is not working properly.
Of course, when your results hurt you, it's a message that sadly many people distract themselves from, numb, or repress. But it's a message saying, hey, I'm here to tell you that something isn't quite right here. Pay attention to it. But no, alcohol, soap operas, shopping, I don't know, right? So how important it is to listen to our pain. We're already starting to see that pain, but it's not here to punish us, right? It's here to teach us, and many times what it comes to teach us is something from our family history.
Because it's not just here to teach us a part of our family history. It comes to show us our capacity and our own tools to be able to repair. I mean, in life, there are always two paths. Either I repeat or I repair. I mean, we all repeat, Johnny. This is a really important question to answer because many times it's like, hey, will I repeat? Because it's not really clear to me. I feel like it has nothing to do with it. I mean, with my mom and my dad, I don't see where the repetition is, and let's not waste our energy on that. We all repeat because it's a fundamental condition of our unconscious.
Of course.
Therefore, the question isn't whether I'm repeating. The question is, what am I repeating and what impact is that repetition having on my connections, on my relationships? And then how can I fix it?
Exactly. Where things are fine, well, that's incredible, right? If something affects me negatively or is an opportunity to grow, that's when I need to pay attention. We all repeat that. I want to highlight it. Why? You go deeper, but it's because that's what we learned. It's not the information we were given. And besides, we're creatures of habit. What would you say?
Yes, and also we repeat because it's the way the unconscious tries to digest an old wound from the past. Let's see, we repeat what didn't sit well with us. It's as if right now, I mean, we ate some really heavy tacos and suddenly, well, the body itself is going to start producing regurgitations because you literally start to bring the food back up because something didn't sit well with you. The mind does the same thing. When something doesn't sit well with it, when it can't process something, what it does is start to repeat it, kind of with the intention of being able to digest it. But it's totally unconscious, of course. That information goes to our archive, the cerebellum, the unconscious, where it's stored. Because somehow our mind protects us at some point of crisis and says, no, this is too much, this is really tough information. What Maria went through with her alcoholic father and the feeling that this man wasn't emotionally available for her is really hard. I'm not going to leave it so present in her conscious mind. I'll store that information in storage, in the cerebellum, in the unconscious, and leave it there. But I need to somehow process it. What am I going to do? Repeat it in my actions, in my choices, in my decisions.
You know, I had never seen it that way. Since we leave it for later, I'm going to save you the trouble right now so you can manage it, survive, and move forward. We create this trauma or this wound and we dose it out to see how you handle it, right?
Yes.
The thing is, when you don't listen, the unconscious starts to scream at you.
Exactly.
What role does rumination play here, for example, beyond these unconscious scenes?
Well, rumination and worry are two different manifestations of anxiety, let's say, of a rational type. I mean, anxiety is an emotion, but it can suddenly have physical manifestations like trembling, sweaty hands, or emotional ones like being very irritable, right? But rational anxiety shows up in my rumination, which is when I'm constantly thinking things like, but what did I do? But how did I do it? But did I understand it differently? But I'm constantly ruminating about what already happened and I keep going over and over it in my head. And worry is more about the future. What will happen and how will things turn out? And of course, rumination can often be a defense because we're ruminating about things that aren't necessarily important, to cover up what's truly important.
Okay.
Just now you were saying, well, yes, it's like dosing it out. Look, human beings are like a computer. If you open all the files on your computer at the same time, it goes crazy.
It crashes, yes.
It crashes. I mean, it breaks down. So what should you do? Just open the files you're going to need at that moment to function. You keep the others saved. Right now, I'm going to work on this document and I need to open this file. But that doesn't mean it's not loaded with a lot of information that eventually you'll have to clean up, organize, and arrange if you want your computer to last a long time, right? And that's what this process is about. It's about organizing those files.
But it's interesting because our body is very wise. Our unconscious is very wise because it allows us to gradually process and open files. But because we don't pay attention to those files, we don't read them, and we just send them to the trash, to email, or wherever we want instead of putting them in their place, we end up collapsing, just like you said. It's either I keep ruminating on the same thing and make it huge, or I repeat it so much that I get terrible results in life, whether it's in my relationships or wherever you want. So, in what way? I mean, The title of your book here is Repetir or Reparar, and we're also going to go back to teenagers and couples. But how can we start becoming aware that we're repeating things and look at our results? Could you give us a quick exercise for everyday life?
The great tool we have is our ability to ask ourselves questions, because through questions we can find many answers. Maria comes to my office because she starts to wonder if something is happening, and in some way she also tells me about it. I'm involved with a married man and now I'm pregnant, but this isn't the first time it's happened. I mean, something already seems strange to me here, right? In that question, she started to find answers. But it all comes from, let's see, what's going on with my patterns and my relationships? The big question is about the emotion. How do I feel when I interact with someone? What is the emotion that comes up most often in my life, in my relationships? Because suddenly there are people who say, let's see, I feel like the emotion that comes up most often for me is shame. I mean, wherever I am in any situation or circumstance, I end up having this feeling that I'm not enough, that I didn't measure up, and that's shame. That, let's say, the origin of shame is the feeling of not being enough.
Okay.
That question helps us understand where this core of shame became so strong in you. So suddenly this person starts to understand, of course, in the school of life and love, our parents, our first relationships.
Okay.
And that's the foundation of our relationships. We learn to bond and relate through our parents or the people who took care of us. Yes, in our childhood.
That's where our whole operating system and way of loving were shaped. But then there are a lot of people here who manage to understand, for example, in therapy or with certain tools. Now I know why this happens to me because my dad and my mom, blah, blah, blah. What's the next step so you don't stay stuck in the past? We've already learned something. Is it responsibility or what would you call it?
Yes, but that step you just mentioned is not a small one. Naming what's happening to us, that can take us quite a while. If we don't name it, Johnny, it isn't real. I can have all kinds of suspicions in my head, Could that be it? And I can mull it over and kind of chew on it, but if I don't name it, if I don't put it into words, if I don't write it down, I love it when they write it down. There's no way out now. You already wrote it down. I didn't say it like that, but that's what you wrote.
In your own handwriting. Bring in an expert. Yes.
I mean, it's much harder to escape from our own thoughts, right? The thing here is that if we don't name it, it doesn't become real. And if it's not real, I can't change it.
Okay.
So the first step, the one you just mentioned, is key because that's the moment when it becomes real.
Yes.
A situation that has been dragging me along throughout my life, but once I can make it real, then at the same time, I can name the loss. I can say, okay, I didn't have that with my dad. I didn't have maybe that emotional availability. When I name the loss, the expectation dies and something much more beautiful arises, which is reality.
Of course.
This is what there is. This is what I have. And somehow then, what happens is that the process of repair begins. Repairing is not about making it perfect. It's about making it different. That is, if I already understood it and that's how I've been doing it, it's time to try and dare to do it differently.
Here I mix my previous question with this one. A lot of people already mention it, all that, they've already revealed everything. But they still play the victim. In the part where I stir up the past, I keep blaming, I keep pointing fingers, I keep doing everything. I mention it constantly, 200,000 times. I never had this with my dad or mom. So this is where I want to really emphasize responsibility, and a question comes up. Why do we repeat things and how can we make use of repetition?
Responsibility is the most complex step in any therapeutic process. I mean, if you ask me when a patient is discharged, it's when they manage to take responsibility for their own story.
Okay.
And it can take years. No one should think this is quick or easy or that I've already taken responsibility. Because taking responsibility involves two things. One, showing it through my actions, in the way I do things, in the way I handle things that show I understood something. And two, a change in attitude. Because if I don't have a change in attitude, what is an attitude? It's a predisposition. It's a consistent way of thinking about things. If I don't change that way of thinking, I'll keep thinking the same way. I'm going to keep thinking, of course, I have to be chosen. People have to respond to me emotionally. Because let's see, in the case of Maria, something curious happens here too. What is also repeated in her relationships is the triangle dynamic, and many people here might be able to relate to that. They're drawn to the idea of the triangle. Relationships are one-on-one, but there are many people who, if the third person isn't involved, don't find it as attractive. This triangle dynamic is also something that comes up a lot in relationships. So with Maria, the question is why? Why do you need a third person? All human beings, as part of our development, learned that romantic relationships were triangular because it was mom, dad, and the child.
Look.
And that's where we learn this feeling of competing for love, this feeling of jealousy, this feeling of being excluded, this feeling of being chosen. Because then, mom, are you going to see dad more or me? I want to be the most important thing in your life, mom. Look, this is a natural part of development. It's what we call the Oedipus complex in psychology. It's a process that we all go through, and it's something that needs to be resolved during childhood. As a kid, I thought my parents belonged to each other, so I'd need to find my own someday. Anything is better than nothing for me, right?
All right.
In life, then.
All right.
But I resolved that part of the triangle. But when that part of the triangle doesn't get resolved, what was going on? Maria's father was an alcoholic. The mother would show up, but often caused conflict by drawing attention with her complaints. You're drunk all the time, I can't stand you anymore. And the father spent a lot of energy trying to please Maria's mother, and Maria felt like, no, 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 and what about me? Who sees me? And I'm going to make my dad very happy, and I'm going to make my dad get better and stop drinking. That's where codependency clearly starts to build. And then he's going to love me so much that I'm going to make my dad finally be really happy and he won't have to drink anymore. And she carries that into her relationships in the future. So what did Maria do? It was like this story, also an illusion of wanting more. Because Maria told me one of the things that happens to me a lot is that all the time they promise me, I promise I'm going to leave my wife. I promise that soon I'll be with you completely. Let's return to the past. I promise to quit drinking. I promise I'm going to get better. I promise that.
And I guess that's where the role of the rescuer comes in too. Poor thing, he suffers in his marriage just like my dad suffered from alcoholism. I'll be here for when he decides to get better. How sad, right? I mean, but still, we don't see it now. You said something very, very important that I want to go deeper into. Maria or anyone else, we repeat yes to pace it, but it's also like opening a door, right? It's a kind of opportunity, or as you explained, it's like going back to the past to do it differently. What does that look like?
Like the hope that things will be different this time. Now they really are going to keep their promise. This man who has often said he'd leave his wife for me is finally going to do it. Because back then, they didn't keep their promise. Back then, my dad told me 20 times, I'm going to stop drinking, my little girl, so you can be at peace, so you can be happy, so you know you're the most important thing to me. And it didn't happen. So I bring that situation from the past into my present story. And that's why we say we don't get married to people who seem super attractive to us. In the end, we marry our unresolved issues, right?
I mean, we could say that many people think they choose their partner, but in reality, they're repeating family stories. The scenario you mentioned at the beginning.
Of course, they're choosing a familiar emotional scenario. And that's what makes it so attractive to me, because there's something here that feels very familiar. I feel at home. I literally suffer. I suffer a lot, but this suffering is very familiar to me.
And here's the question that many would ask. If I suffer, even if it's familiar, why do I choose it?
Because new things scare us. All human beings want to be experts in our suffering or in whatever we have to deal with. But to be a beginner in a new, different situation, that scares me even more.
I mean, the uncertainty that we don't know if we'll be able to handle scares us more than the suffering we've already dealt with. We know we're going to survive.
The brain can't handle the feeling of uncertainty. The brain will always need to know what's going to happen around the corner. It can't deal with that feeling of not knowing. I mean, we don't have a plan. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to know that at least a hit is coming, that there's going to be yelling, that something is coming, but I already know that, but I don't know. No, the brain will always insist on these well-worn neural pathways where it says, this is the path we don't know, and this is the path we're going to repeat, even if we've suffered. Because I already know it. And of course, something new, even if it seems like it could be different or better for us, makes us panic.
Nat, check how the equation is set up and how it looks from here. I hope people are keeping up. Wounded children who teach, wounded children who grow up and marry other wounded children, repeating the cycle, and eventually have these teenage children with whom they repeat it all over again. I mean, how do we start to dismantle this mess? How do we start? I know it's a whole thing. Obviously, I'm showing the big picture. But first, what does it mean to start repairing? What is repairing?
Becoming aware. Becoming aware of what I mentioned at the beginning. Don't ask yourselves anymore if you're repeating. Let's start by accepting that we all repeat. Next question. What am I repeating? Let's go to what am I repeating? Third question. How can I know that I'm repeating? Look at your emotions. Which emotion do you keep repeating? Because you repeat it with your children. It's just that I feel rejected all the time. Where am I? With my kids, it feels like they've turned away and stopped loving me. I don't matter anymore. I'm not enough anymore. At work, my boss gave the project to someone else. He must not like me anymore. I'm not enough anymore. And again, the rejection. Well, no. So I start to recognize that little word, rejection. And we need to go and understand where it comes from, how it was built, to be able to dismantle it so that we can then say, what happened to me back then. But here, these are completely different scenarios. My subconscious might want to connect them because they're similar, because it kind of seemed similar. That doesn't mean it's the same thing. The big challenge we have is being able to separate the past from our present so that the past stops interfering with our present.
We'll discuss compatibility in terms of wounds, trauma, or however you want to describe it. But okay, so I see repetition as an opportunity, just like you do, as a threshold for change. But we could say it's like a little voice that keeps telling us like, look, I'm sending you this identical message so that this time you really notice. Every time, every time, every time, every time, every time. But since we were taught to look outward, never inward, we believe that the other person is always to blame. So, that is an obstacle to healing, always seeing the other person as responsible or to blame for our suffering.
Totally, but it's always the easiest thing to do, isn't it?
Why is it easy?
Because in the end, it's much easier to live someone else's life than to live your own. There's a perspective from Byron that I find very interesting because he says there are 3 types of business: my business, your business, and God's business. Understand God as reality or however each person wants to interpret it, but 90% of our lives we're involved in matters that don't concern us. You should be a certain way. You should treat me this way. You should have said this. All the time I'm somehow directing what I think you should do differently, or reality, or God, or whatever. And that only creates a separation from myself, because as long as I'm not focused on myself, I'm not going to understand what's happening to me. And at the same time, there's also a great deal of arrogance in victimization, because we always think we know better what the other person should do when I haven't even been able to solve it myself. In other words, of course, victimization somehow keeps us from taking responsibility. And responsibility undoubtedly requires a lot of emotional energy to confront aspects that are very painful. Realizing we're the common factor in the story, you might say, it already happened to me once. It already happened to me.
Yes.
I mean, is it really that everyone is against me, or is there a common denominator?
How much? Do you agree that our relationships, all of them, whether it's with our children, our partner, our employee, boss, whatever, colleague, they're all meant to confront us, to be a mirror, a teacher?
A teacher, that's right. A teacher, a collaborator in our lives who comes to show us the processes we still need to work on. Everything that was left unfinished, all those wounds that we need to keep healing, working on, and that are a great opportunity if we manage to see it that way, without a doubt.
And do you think that's why many people today don't want to be in a committed relationship or don't want children because they want to avoid that confrontation?
Many times it can also be part of this, of course. These are decisions that require a level of commitment and also an important level of self-knowledge. And of course, these can be many of the reasons why we end up being drawn in that direction. Ideally, Johnny, these decisions should always be made consciously. Many people avoid commitment and decision-making because they're influenced by their past experiences.
One thing would be, as your dad says, our dear Alfonso Ruiz, sending him a kiss, if being single is your calling, great, don't have a partner, or have one, but it won't be marriage. Or suited to being a couple, but not to having kids. Amazing, right? I cover much of this in my next book, Naughty Cases, out in June.
Oh, that's so cool.
We'll be letting you know soon. But I do see that the awareness you're talking about isn't the norm. It's, I don't want to have children because of the impact and responsibility they represent. I don't want to have a partner because I don't want to be mirroring myself or growing or welcoming a teacher into my life. I just want the pleasure of the weekend. And I want to do inner work while I'm single even less because I want to live single life in a hedonistic way, right? So then they see the results and dislike them, Nat. So they live in a kind of strange shock, like I don't like what I manifest because I only have toxic relationships or I feel lonely or whatever, but I also don't want the responsibility. And that's where I imagine the title of your book comes in, Repetir or Reparar.
And it also comes in as the question in reverse, because many people should also ask themselves this question when they want to become parents. Let's see, do you want a child or do you want to be a mom or dad? Because those are two different stories. Wanting a child and wanting to be a mom or dad, it's exactly like you just said. Let's see.
Clarify it for us.
Wanting a child suddenly is the need to heal my own wounds, my little abandonment issues. It's like wanting a child so they can come and now everything will be perfect. No, no, no. We're going to love each other. I'm going to give them my whole self. It's going to be an amazing relationship. And the expectation is based on trying to resolve a story from the past. Being a mom or dad is very different because it involves all this responsibility you're talking about.
Yes.
Being a mom or dad means taking on an independent commitment of unconditional love. And that's really intense, right? I mean, it's being able to accept that you're going to let your child be their own person without needing them to fix your wounds from the past, right? Because a lot of the issues that parents bring to my office, parents of teenagers, are about this. Suddenly, I had the expectation that my son would be with me all his life, and now it turns out I don't see him and he's out all day with his friends. And then there are mothers who fall into a terrible depression.
They use him as an emotional stand-in for a husband. Not long ago, I was at the restaurant and some people who had attended my conferences came up to me and said, "Johnny, wow, what you do is amazing," and so on. We started talking. I send them my regards if they know who they are and are watching this. But she said to me, "Johnny, I get really sad when my son, a teenager, he doesn't text me to see how I'm doing, or when I ask him to hug me, he doesn't want to hug me." I said, "That's because he's not your partner. It's great the boy is living his life and not worried about his mom. If he were, that would be cause for concern."
Of course.
Imagine the trauma of worrying about how my mom is doing when she's a 50-year-old adult. It's fine occasionally, but it shouldn't be normal. What do you think?
It's this, right? Did I want to be a child, or did I want to be a mom, or did I want to be a dad, you know? Because when those things are triggered by the kids, wow, that's when you have to be careful, right? Because then it's very clear that we're putting an expectation on them to come and fix things. It's a lack. Our needs always reflect what we're lacking. When I have a strong need for love, for affection, in some way it's reflecting a part of what I didn't have, right? Need reflects lack. And if I'm constantly demanding this from my children, and I have a strong need, sweetie, for you to see me, to acknowledge me, to approve of me, because guess what? There are a lot of unresolved issues from the past. It gets really complicated.
Yes.
It gets really complicated because we end up putting a huge responsibility on these kids.
Really heavy. And then, now that you mention it, I'll emphasize it since we'll discuss couples and focus on adolescence. And especially me, as a future dad, I hope to be one. I'm here to learn a lot from you today. So we see how saying I want a child is like saying I want a crutch, right? We could translate it that way. I have a friend who once told my brother and me, "I'm going to be happy when I have a child. He's Galician, that's just how he is." I say it to his face. I told him, my brother and I said to him, what a heavy emotional burden that is.
Yes,
You're going to put that on your poor son? He's the one who won't be happy.
yes.
On the other hand, I see many people, as you mentioned, who say they want to be moms. But because they have all that DNA of caring, of being responsible, right? Of everything that being a mom implies. So this is a wake-up call, because if there's a reason I haven't had kids yet, even though my wife already wants to, it's because, well, my wife wants to be a mom. She doesn't want kids. I think we're on the same wavelength there. It's because I know how big a responsibility it is, and I say, hold on a second, because when I get into that, I know I'm going to go all in. And I know there will be things I'll have to learn, we'll talk about that in a bit, and things, my own shortcomings and all that, but I say, hold on a second. Because I don't see it the way a lot of people do, just coasting through it, like, oh, I already had 3 and the guy doesn't even see them or can't support them. Or the woman ends up carrying everything, or they're just very neglected kids. Now in daycare centers, so it does get your attention, that being said. How can those of us who are going to be parents, or those who already are, how can we start doing this? Well, it's about noticing ourselves while we're surfing the waves of marriage or already being parents. I mean, how do you start?
Of course, everything starts with a desire. I mean, desire is in some way part of what leads us as human beings to achieve what we want in our lives. So, of course, the desire has to arise, the act of wanting. Because that baby starts to form from desire. It's not even in the womb or developing yet, but of course, that baby is already desired.
Let it not be just what you're supposed to do. Let it be a desire.
Let it be a desire. This is very important, that it comes from desire. But eventually, from desire, of course, many questions will start to come up. What you're going through happens to everyone in one way or another. How good, healthy, and wise it would be to go through that process. I mean, that speaks of a process of awareness, right? It's not just about doing what you're supposed to or not knowing or being half numb, and there they are in the hospital, the couple in the room next door, I mean, with who knows how much stuff going on because they can't handle the pressure. Like now they're wondering, when did all of this fall on me, right?
Agreed.
And the lady there kind of bringing her husband back to life.
Yes, she just gave birth.
But you say, of course, because she didn't go through a process of awareness. And that's the ideal. When our decisions are made consciously, there's no room for what if. The what if is that I should have waited a little longer. It's that it would have been better at another time. The what if is always on our minds, and though we say it doesn't exist, it really does. Because it exists in our minds, and all the time we're somehow torturing ourselves with what we think we could have done differently. And when the what if keeps lingering in our minds, it's because there was a decision that wasn't made consciously.
Okay.
And I think that's very important. In the end, when our decisions are made consciously, it's much easier to know that the essential ingredient that will make us good parents is our ability to be present with our children. Presence is what a human being truly needs to be nurtured. They don't need anything else. Now, it sounds really easy, but learning to be present is a whole different story, right?
In what way exactly, what does it mean to be present? Because look, today I see, and thank goodness for Amazon for many things, but today I see a lot of parents. I'm not judging them. I'm not a parent, just learning and discussing. They're giving away 850,000 toys at every birthday, every Christmas, every occasion. And the child has 850,000 toys and none of them satisfy him anymore. It's like, oh, I open one, play for 2 minutes, but then I open another and I don't even know what. And one day my dad told me something very important that stayed with me for life. He told me, do you know what your child's greatest toy is? The one that will make him really happy and that he can play with? With you as his dad. That presence, he told me, don't buy them so many toys. Play with them. He's right, but what other elements make up that presence?
Presence has to do with that look, that feeling. When someone says, I felt seen by my mom or dad, it doesn't mean they said, oh, you're such a champion. You're the best and you're the prettiest. Recognition is the feeling that someone valued my existence. They tell me, no. That they took a moment to say, my dear, I'm here, not to cheer you on, but to ask, how much blue are you putting in your drawing? Hey, do you think there could be a squirrel inside this tree? I mean, when I approach my son and ask him these questions and really look at what he's doing, it's my way of showing him that I'm present. These moms who maybe later we go to soccer and then we start chatting and get caught up in conversation, and then it's like, sweetie, wow, you're such a great goal scorer. The child knows that's empty. He doesn't feel like you watched the whole game. So that's very important, because presence isn't about quantity, it's about quality. It's no use for a dad or a mom to be there all day if they don't give their child the most important thing. The most important thing is this moment when I look at you, I confirm your existence, and I make you feel that you have value in my life, for those of us who love you and are around you.
And from what you say, it's simpler than we think.
It's much more.
It's about intentionally making time for it.
It's like when you tell your partner, hey honey, that time you wore the blue tie with the little dots, and you think, how does she remember that, right? Because I looked at you, you looked amazing, I loved it, and how you matched it, you say, wow, it's so different from just saying you look gorgeous. Well, yes, thank you, but it's so different when you describe it. You look so beautiful. But it's because I loved how you did your hair and your makeup and how you matched everything. That gives you the feeling of, oh, they really took the time to really look beyond just saying, how pretty, right? Because that's kind of cold, very superficial.
When this doesn't happen, Nat, in childhood, well, we already know about childhood wounds, but in adolescence, do those wounds get worse if you don't work with a teenager while also working on your own wounds, or do new ones develop?
Of course, because what happens here is that the teenager gains strength during adolescence, right? I mean, in childhood, we feel very dependent on our parents in some way. But look, adolescence, above all, it's very important to understand that it comes to an end physiologically, but also psychologically. This matters because it's when we, as parents, start to feel the weight, right? It's these wounds that are going to start showing up, of course, also in our teenagers, but where they, in some way, are also going to start seeing us as their equals. In some way, it's already more like a relationship that's moving toward what comes next, which is adult life. And what closes, let's say, the stage of adolescence is when a teenager is able to tolerate that at some point their parents are going to be disappointed. That is, that I can tolerate this idea of, oh no, my dear, but how are you going to marry this woman? Mom, she's the woman I chose. She's the one I want, and I can tolerate your disappointment. Maybe I can understand that she's not who you wanted or expected, but that feeling of being able to tolerate your parents' disappointment is what marks the end of adolescence. Otherwise, what you end up with is the eternal adolescent, because right now we're talking about teenagers, maybe just in one stage of life.
Yes.
But I'm sure you know many men in their 50s or 60s, or women who are still like that.
The eternal Peter Pan?
An eternal teenager, but then
100%. But then, let's see, if the teenager can handle the disappointment from his dad,
it's a sign of maturity.
a sign of maturity, but that sign will be reflected, and this is where the paradox begins that I need you to help me figure out. Obviously, they should go read the book. We're not going to tell them everything here. But if parents are a fundamental part in helping them reach that maturity, and they're saying they're disappointed in their decisions, how? I mean, the child can't grow up alone, or rather they can, but it's not always the best way. How?
Let's see. Ideally, of course, you'd be able to respect those decisions, right? To say, I accept it. Maybe it's not what I wanted, but I respect it, but it's not always going to be like that. Some parents will try to change their children's decisions, saying, how will you study that major? You'll starve. Are you crazy? Come on, Mom, I want to be a marine biologist. I mean, whatever, it's what I'm passionate about. I love it, and I can tolerate your disappointment. The moment we, as human beings, are able to tolerate that disappointment, not just from our parents, because of course it also carries over to other people, it's an art to learn how to disappoint people and tolerate that disappointment, because if we don't, we spend our whole lives trying to please others, of meeting their expectations, of being what they expect from us, and at what point do we start living our own lives?
Yes.
At the moment when we reach maturity and we can say, I'm sorry, I know I'm disappointing you and it feels horrible because I don't like it. I would love to please you in everything, right? But I'm going to tolerate it. I'm going to be able to live with that. And despite all of that, I'm going to be able to make my own decisions because this is what resonates with me. This is what I'm passionate about. This is who I am.
And the thing is, rebellion is a path toward that.
Rebellion, this is really important because a lot of times it can be confused with rebellion, right? But rebellion is a process that happens in kids or teenagers who didn't feel understood. Not being understood leads to rebellion. When someone doesn't feel understood, for example, this kid who might be texting or I know on the phone during meals, and then they've already told him, put the phone away, and he says, I'm not going to put it away, and he doesn't, because maybe at that moment what he feels is not being understood. Don't you understand that they're sending me the math test answers right now, and I'm not going to put the phone away? Can't you understand me? I don't care. Turn off the phone and let's eat, right? So then that makes me get up and, well, I leave the house and all that, 20 things that can escalate, right? Why? Because what triggers rebellion is a process of not being understood.
Okay, which can be momentary or ongoing. But then there's, for example, let's think about people who start to, they got more rebellious then, like you'd say, damn, they don't even seem like the kids of these two, right? They have nothing in common, they dress differently, style their hair differently, want different things, heavy rock, I don't know. It would be kind of like telling mom and dad, I need you to handle this disappointment and for me to be able to deal with that disappointment, or it has nothing to do with it.
Yes, and this is super interesting because there are a lot of kids who also, when the relationship is really close, like really enmeshed, there will be kids who will create a situation where their parents end up disappointed so that the separation can finally happen. It's like an unconscious process where I need to make you feel that disappointment so that you'll finally let me go because I don't see any other way for you to let me go. We're way too close, like we're glued together. So yes, it can definitely happen. There are many situations and circumstances that can cause, for example, I'm not saying it's always the case, but pregnancies, right? Among teenagers, where sometimes they can't find any other way to separate from their parents, right? Like, oh, what do you mean you're pregnant? And then the disappointment, and then that's when you let me go. I'm not saying this happens in every case, but there can be situations like these. But what you're saying is absolutely true. Of course it happens. These processes are created where they try to trigger that disappointment in their parents so they can finally achieve the long-awaited separation.
That's the good side. But the father's lack of acceptance has to do with his own wounds, with his own unresolved issues, not allowing your child to be an independent person.
It has to do with your expectations, right? Wait a minute, you're an extension of me. I mean, when did you come up with wanting to be a marine biologist? We're a family of lawyers. And now you come to me with this.
No, that's not it. So even in the profession, it repeats itself, right?
Totally, of course.
It's the same information repeated over and over. And a lot of people hate their profession, they don't like going to work, and they only do it because that's what their family does. How many people do we know like that, for God's sake? So how important the word repair is. So, it's a topic that I think could fill an encyclopedia of podcasts. But I want to focus a little more now on couples, because thinking that, well, your parents did the best they could. We already know that. You did what you could as a teenager, same as a child. You go out into the adult world being this person who says, well, I think I'm an adult. I have gray hair. I'm 40. I'm 30 something. And suddenly you realize that you're a teenager, or you realize that you have a lot of emotional wounds, but you don't notice it consciously. You just start to have, like your client or your student, I don't remember, Maria.
Yes.
Patterns. One of the first ones I want to discuss with you, because I also love the way you explain it, is why do I get hooked, or why do I match with someone who immediately triggers a very strong chemistry in me? I don't know them. I've only had 1 or 2 dates. And I really don't know anything about him, but there's something about him that obsesses me. What would you say this is due to?
The obsession is with the story, right? The obsession is with the emotional scenario that makes me feel like I'm back in familiar territory, in a place that I know. But it also offers me this huge opportunity that this time the story will be different and have a happy ending. Thank you.
Does our unconscious, along with our traumas, recognize those in others?
Of course, we can sense each other. Immediately, our unconscious minds create this feeling of, I find something very familiar and known here, right? And so that's why it's really important, because you just said a word that's worth stopping to talk about. Let's see, the process in which we become more and more connected in a relationship starts with a click. That click is the first spark. It's like saying, wow, that caught my attention.
Something caught my attention.
Something. At that point, you're not yet in the process of, let's say, falling in love. right? That's when all the cathexes are going to start happening. All this energy that you're going to start developing. That click is the moment when your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for making decisions, planning, and emotional self-regulation, is still working. The next step is that it's going to get blocked and it won't work anymore. Goodbye logic. Goodbye logic. That little moment is the moment when you have to say, wait a second, is this good for me? Is this good for me? That is to say, no, he's a married man, or no, he's my best friend's ex, or no, he's my boss, or whatever it is. No, it's not good for me. And then in that moment, I can choose who I fall in love with. Because that's a big question. Can you choose who you fall in love with? Yes.
Yes. Which fire do you feed?
Yes. But you have to pause at that first spark. Because what comes next is, oh well, if you didn't think about it and you just go for it, now it's goodbye prefrontal cortex. Everything is going to be this feeling of yes. So many neurotransmitters will flood your system and you won't be able to think anymore.
In my book, which is about to be released, called No to Cases, I say there are two doors through which you can enter a relationship. Awareness, which is what you're talking about, is, look, I see it, and despite everything, I'm in.
Yes.
And to work on it together, and above all, individually. Or the wound, which is where you go in without that awareness. First question, would you say that most people come in through the door? Which one? Which one? Honestly,
I think that of course we go in through the wound.
me too.
Ideally, we would enter through the door of consciousness. But the reality is that many times we need to go through many doors where we've been wounded until we finally reach a depth of emotional pain that helps us develop awareness.
So then we come full circle with this repetition. It's not a punishment.
Of course,
It's an opportunity.
it's an opportunity.
But people torment themselves because they repeat things, and then they come to your office or to my workshops and play the victim. See it as an opportunity. You enter through the wound, sorry, and the delicious infatuation begins, which you have to enjoy. Don't limit yourself. Next, I say the adjustment phase begins. This famous my rose-colored glasses fell off moment. That's when we face each other, we confront one another. And then comes that moment of, oh man, I didn't think love was going to be like this. I'm seeing everything I don't like. Of course I'm going to point at you, because you're going to be the one to blame and I'm going to be the victim, but it's mine. How do you invite people to, before ending a relationship, before getting divorced, even before having children, to take a closer look? What would you tell them?
Because up until now, we've talked about our individual patterns of repetition.
Yes.
But when it comes to a couple, we also have to look at the patterns we repeat as a couple.
I loved how you explained it.
Because this also deserves a very important analysis. So this couple comes to my office, and usually couples come to me like this. We fight over stupid things, but those stupid things end up escalating to a level where it can get really tough, and eventually we end up distant or not talking to each other, and something is going on. So maybe a fight that starts because I'm fed up that you left the bathroom a mess eventually ends up escalating to a level where you stop talking to each other for 2 or 3 days, where you start going at each other really hard, and then we start to analyze what pattern is repeating itself. One of the patterns that tends to repeat itself in couples, and there are many, is cheap shots in a relationship. A low blow in a relationship is when they end up throwing each other's past in each other's faces in the middle of an argument. Because maybe as a couple you shared a moment of intimacy with your wife or your partner at some point. This happened in my childhood, and that's how my relationship with my dad was. But in the middle of a conflict, we're really good at putting those cards on the table. Of course, just like your mom. Well, yes, who raised you? And you've told me that you couldn't stand your mom's chaos. Well, let me tell you, you're becoming your mom. And when those wounds are touched, all hell breaks loose. But many times in a relationship, we use those cheap shots when we feel cornered, and I just don't see where else to go. And they're really piling the blame on me here. I'm unable to take responsibility for what's mine. So I throw a nuclear bomb. And for example, when we can discover that pattern of repetition, couples can then make changes and adjustments. It's forbidden to bring our past stories into the middle of the fight because we're actually turning something from the present into something else.
Of course.
Something from the past, for example. But there are many couples who, suddenly, another pattern they repeat is competing with each other. And they start to compete, and they start to compete professionally, and they start to compete for their children's love, and they start to compete over who is better, mom or dad, who do they love more, for what. These levels of competition come up.
Why would you say you end up there? Why would you say you end up with the person you swore you were going to be happy with, that you were going to feel safe with, that was going to be your partner? Why do you end up treating yourself like your worst enemy?
First of all, it's a great gift because, as we said, it's a teacher. How wonderful. It comes to teach us many things. But of course, in some way, what we're also looking for is for our partner to end up solving the little conflict we've been carrying around all along.
You said it perfectly, because people don't understand. I didn't understand it either until you've lived it. Obviously, you can understand it in theory. The journey of self-discovery, the opportunity for growth and development, which is what a romantic relationship and especially marriage offer.
Yes, and what a great privilege it is when both people give themselves the chance to go through a psychotherapeutic process. I can't even begin to tell you the story. The truth is that, of course, that's something that helps clarify so many things along the way. Because then I start to separate my own story from the story of my present, from what we're building together. And then we can look at each other in a very different way. But yes, it's a natural tendency. And finding our repeating patterns within the relationship is fundamental so that we can then make the necessary adjustments. Some people quickly make changes like scheduling a fight and it works well.
How?
Scheduling a fight?
What is that?
I mean, we're going to have an argument. I already know I'm going to bring up this topic that's going to get heated.
Okay.
Let's make an appointment. We need to talk. When are you free? I already gave you a heads up. All right, okay, Thursday night, perfect. I've already given you 3 or 4 days to think about the problem. Now you'll give me your whole spiel and I'll see where you're coming from. Because sometimes we have the bad habit of coming to our partner and wanting to confront a lot of situations at the worst possible moment.
Yeah, when the impulse hits us.
When the impulse hits us, because we can't tolerate discomfort and we want to solve it right away. And I say, I need to resolve this now. I can't wait anymore. But nothing gets resolved.
No?
It's very different. For example, one of the things that is sometimes agreed upon during a couples therapy session is this. If this person is causing the problem, let's set up an appointment to argue, often at the therapist's office, right?
Yes, without a doubt. Yes, I see it too, and I've been there too. Yes.
But somehow it allows them not to be messing with the issue at other times, which only makes things worse instead of solving anything. They could end up in a much bigger conflict because they don't have the tools, they're not in the right headspace, it's not the right time, and so on. Anyway, there are so many adjustments that can be made, Johnny Abraham, when we can discover what our own pattern of repetition is within our relationship.
And Nat, you and I really agree on that. That's why we're here trying to share this message. But there are a lot of people who ask me, Johnny, what's the point? I mean, what's the point? What's the reward? What am I going to achieve? Is it really worth all the trouble? Yeah, okay, I get that my partner isn't my enemy, but rather a teacher, a mirror. Same with me. Hey, stress, but with a purpose, okay? And then, I mean, people tell me that a lot. You're married, you have 2 or 3 kids.
3 kids?
3 kids. You've been with Adrian for 30 years.
With Adrian?
Dating and marriage combined. We send Adrian and your kids a hug too. What would you say are the nuggets or the pure gold that you have received from all this work, from all this introspection, and from doing the repair work so you don't repeat it?
As simple as living in peace. It's just that everything is worth it as long as you can live in peace. I mean, our peace is priceless. And what's the point of having good relationships and living in peace with your relationships, having a good relationship with your partner, if it's not so, you can go and do other things in your life? I mean, the fact that I can have energy that's not tied up in conflict and come talk with you on a podcast. In a way, it happens because I have this settled, because it's resolved, it gives me stability, and I can come and go and live my life. Human beings need to have energy that's not tied up in conflict so we can be creative and productive, do what we like, go after our dreams, our ideals. All that machinery working in your favor for your quality of life, right?
I think so, yeah.
So it's this, right? You tell me, all for what? To live in peace.
I agree with you, and I also understand that peace that comes from satisfaction and from the prospect of becoming a better version of yourself. I'm following a process, obviously on my own path. Well, I haven't been married for 30 years, but people say, well, but I'm at peace. Joking around and going from one partner to another when that's not always true, right? How does it look? I mean, that peace and that satisfaction are different from pleasure, which people confuse with happiness. From that pleasure, from that gratification.
From that gratification, because many times this is part of what we need to see. Happiness is precisely the feeling of stability. It's very different from the feeling of joy, which is this spark, which is dopamine.
Euphoria.
Which is like, I had an amazing time. That's euphoria. Happiness is the feeling of floating in an ocean. At peace, calm. There aren't these ups and downs or this rush. It's the feeling of saying, I feel satisfied. I don't want anything more. That feeling of not wanting anything more, wow, that's what we do all this inner work for. So being able to achieve this feeling of satisfaction, of fulfillment, that's what we call fulfillment. It has to do with the work on our inner world, because that's what will really give us quality of life. It's no use for me to be surrounded by the best conditions if internally I'm having a terrible time.
And it's not about settling. People often confuse that calmness or not wanting more with settling. No, it's just that I like this so much and it gives me that creativity and those opportunities. Not having to think every weekend about who I'm going to hook up with. And to dedicate my energy to other things, it becomes, I want to take care of this and I don't want anything more than this. This is wonderful. On the other hand, the addict's symptom is wanting more each time, but feeling less. So I agree with you. And not only do I agree, I invite people to seek to repair and heal themselves so they don't keep repeating what hurts them. And above all, so you don't pass on those family loyalties and habits to your children. And that way, you can have a slightly shorter path to better relationships, a better world, children who are better off, and better results in life. But it starts with you, right?
Absolutely. And that's what this book is about, if you give yourself the chance to read it. After each chapter, there are exercises so that it doesn't just stay theoretical, but so you can put it into practice. Finish the book with that awareness. This, I repeat, this is the impact it's having on my relationships, and this is how I can repair it. So you'll be able to put that puzzle together.
I love it, and you start putting that puzzle together mainly by looking at your results and listening to your emotions, or am I wrong?
That's right.
Nat, you have no idea how much I enjoy our conversations. Check out the other episode I did with Nat, where we also discussed patterns. But I think this one blew my mind, especially because I'm just getting into this topic, the one you talk about in your book. Where can people get it?
On Amazon and at Café La Mancha bookstores. Okay.
Great. Follow her on social media. Are you listed as Natalia Ruiz?
I'm listed as Adra Nat Ruizo. Nat Ruiz O. Awesome.
Well, we hope to have you back.
Thank you, Johnny.
I hope you liked it, and above all, that you give it a like so it can reach more people, and they can start their awakening process and work on themselves and heal, and at least avoid repeating the most important things. From there, we keep building. Subscribe to the channel so you get the new episodes, and don't forget that I have a link there in the episode description with my book, workshops, courses, and many more things. Nat, we're giving you a round of applause here on set, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.